Interest groups are central to the idea that democracy thrives when different voices, interests, and groups are all jostling for influence. They are one of the most common ways people engage in the democratic process between elections. That's the good news. The bad news is that interest groups also have a, let's say, bad reputation, and not without reason. The outsized influence of money, especially corporate money, has warped the field. Some groups have better lobbyists, better PACs, and easier access to power. That can distort democracy. But interest groups aren't inherently corrupt. They're tools. And like any tool, their impact depends on how they're used. They're also a powerful way to build social capital. Robert Putnam, in his book, Bowling Alone, warned us that democracy doesn't just run on laws and institutions. It runs on relationships, networks of trust and reciprocity. Interest groups, especially community-based ones, are a way to reweave that social fabric. They remind us that participation isn't just about what happens at the voting booth. It's about being part of something bigger than yourself. And interest groups don't have to be thought of in abstract or narrowly political terms. Much like bureaucracies, most people are part of interest groups without even realizing it. College students are an interest group. So are Amazon warehouse workers. So are teachers, nurses, and broadly retail workers. If you've ever joined a professional association, advocated for a cause, or signed onto a petition, you've operated in the realm of an interest group. So let's dive into these behind-the-scenes players who shape policy, from loud and righteous to shadowy and slick. All of them matter because they give form to one of the oldest realities in politics. When people organize, they get heard. When they don't, they get left out.
This special interest group.
All these interest groups.
Interest group money.
It has largely been driven by special interest groups.
What exactly is an interest group? And why do they get people all riled up? To figure this out, let's play which of these is an interest group? Dog owners, kindergartners, car dealers, or NBA players? The answer? They all could be interest groups. People who care about the same things come together to form an interest group. In order to advance their goals, interest groups can seek to influence the government for funding or favorable laws. For example, kindergartners want more recess. Car dealers want to close the deal. And NBA players, they just want to jam. There are a lot of ways that interest groups try to influence the government. Some hire lobbyists to make their case for them. Some take to the streets to hold rallies or start petitions. Some groups let money do the talking and donate to politicians. And some take to the airwaves and social media to get noticed. But why are interest groups controversial? Interest groups work to promote the interests of their members, and this can mean working against the interests of others. The difference between interest group and special interest is a matter of perspective. For instance, who could be against a playground? How about a retiree who doesn't have kids or grandkids? He doesn't want to pay more taxes for a playground he'll never use.
We all want the government to be on our side. But sometimes it's hard to accommodate the interests of every group.
We need to pull back the curtain on how interest groups form, why they matter, and how they tend to bend government to their will. You'll find that their power doesn't just come from money or access. It comes from their ability to solve a basic democratic riddle. How do you get individuals to act collectively in a system that rewards self-interest? So what counts as an interest group? A union, sure. The NRA? Absolutely. Mothers Against Drunk Driving? You bet. A small neighborhood association pushing for speed bumps? That too. An interest group is a group of people with shared political or economic goals, organizing themselves to influence government decisions. At its best, this is pluralism in action, a system where different groups compete, counterbalance, and contribute to the democratic process. The idea is that while your individual voice might be small, grouped with others, it can boom like thunder. Democracy is about building coalitions, lobbying your representatives, showing up at City Hall. Interest groups amplify citizens' voices between elections. That's a feature of the system when it's done right. Interest groups don't form in a vacuum. They usually arise when something in society shifts, a new threat, an unmet need, a moral outrage. These are what political scientists call disturbances. They shake people awake. They make what was once tolerable intolerable. That's the basis of disturbance theory. For example, rising gun violence gave birth to March for Our Lives. Harsh immigration policy sparked new advocacy coalitions like United We Dream. These shocks create a need and a mission. Then there's collective action theory, which says it's actually really hard to get people to organize even when they share a common interest. People tend to free ride, assuming others will do the work. That's why interest groups often offer selective incentives, material perks, social belonging, or the satisfaction of advocacy. Think of AARP offering discounts, or how an org gives you that tote bag and a sense of purpose. Exchange theory focuses on the value proposition between leaders and members. Leaders supply benefits in exchange for support. AARP, again, is a good example. Or even something like Patreon. You fund someone's work, and in return, you get perks, you get shout outs, and you get access. Finally, there's entrepreneurial theory. This one says that a charismatic leader, someone with vision, drive, and maybe a personal state, can will a movement into being. Think Candace Lightner from Mothers Against Drunk Driving after her daughter was killed by a drunk driver. Or David Hogg channeling his trauma from the Parkland shooting into national gun reform advocacy. Without that kind of leadership, many groups never get off the ground. So yes, interest groups form because of disturbances, but whether they last depends on leadership, depends on strategy and incentives, and most of all, persistence.
To most of us, Labor Day means time off from work, maybe a barbecue to mark the official end of summer. But how much do you know about what inspired its creation? The labor movement started around the Industrial Revolution, a time in the late 19th century when America exploded in size and wealth. Advances in technology created manufacturing jobs, and people moved to cities to work in factories. But it wasn't the workers getting rich. It was their bosses who raked in big profits by paying low wages for long hours. Fed up with big business, industrial workers created unions to fight for better conditions. Unions are the backbone of the labor movement. But what exactly did they accomplish? Well, for one, you can thank the labor movement for your work-free weekend. In the late 1800s, the average American worked as much as 100 hours a week. Unions held strikes to demand shorter work weeks and an 8-hour workday to make time for family and relaxation. The most famous strike, the Haymarket Riots, happened in Chicago on May 1st, 1886, with thousands of people taking to the streets, and their voices only grew louder from there. The labor movement also protested child labor. Remember those black and white photos of children with dirty, sad faces wearing overalls and beanie caps? Those kids weren't playing outside, but they were working in factories. In 1881, unions demanded that businesses stop hiring kids under 14. And slowly but surely, measures against child labor caught on around the country. Eventually, all those protests got results. In 1938, Congress passed a law called the Fair Labor Standards Act, which set the 40-hour workweek, regulated child labor, and set standards for minimum wage and overtime pay. In the 1930s and 1940s, workers were also able to negotiate health benefit plans from their employers. Though union membership is on a decline today, it's undeniable that the labor movement forever changed the way Americans live, work, and even relax.
Perhaps one of the more recognizable types of interest groups are labor unions. The labor movement was born out of structural shocks, monopolistic practices, exploitative wages, brutal work hours, and even child labor. These were moral and economic emergencies. So disturbance theory fits perfectly here. As unions matured, they started offering selective incentives, strike funds and death benefits and legal representation and solidarity. This aligns with Manker-Olson's logic. You have to overcome the free rider problem. You have to give people a reason to join, even if the benefits are broadly shared. And yes, leadership matters. Visionaries like A. Philip Randolph and Dolores Huerta were organizers, yes, but also they were entrepreneurs in the political sense, bringing movements to life through grit and imagination.
So how did a group of suburban moms in the 1980s reduce drunk driving deaths and go on to impact laws, language, and modern-day movements? Mothers Against Drunk Driving, or MAD, is responsible for so many of the driving while impaired laws that we have in place today. From blood alcohol levels to the national drinking age, they even coined the term designated driver. In the early 80s, drunk driving didn't have the same stigma that it has today. But after MAD, the behavior became taboo, and drunk driving-related deaths decreased by 50%. But there have been lots of activist groups in history. So what made MAD so specifically successful? Parents and volunteers of MAD worked to reach legislators directly, carrying large-frame photos of their children and protesting state capitals nationwide. And it was this use of direct emotional appeals that proved to be a most effective method in making change.
Now, MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, was founded by Candace Lightner after her daughter was killed by a drunk driver. MAD is a textbook example of entrepreneurial theory. It emerged not out of a workplace grievance or a long-standing political identity, but out of trauma and urgency. Mothers were disturbed that society was too quiet on this issue, so they organized. Their influence has been profound in shifting public attitudes and changing laws, and really creating a national conversation around drinking and driving, all driven by clear moral focus and the relentless energy of those directly impacted. Forming an interest group is hard work, but keeping one alive and active is even harder. Groups face a built-in problem. People are rational actors. They want the benefits without the costs. Even when it's in everyone's collective interest to cooperate, many people choose not. We call this the collective action problem. Everyone wants clean air, but not everyone wants to pay the membership fee to the environmental group fighting for it. Everyone wants safer roads, but not everyone wants to show up to city council meetings. Without incentives, without some way of linking personal gain to public goods, most people stay on the sidelines. We should talk about game theory, specifically the prisoner's dilemma. This is a classic example used to explain why rational actors often don't work together, even when it's clearly in their best interest. But instead of using old dusty hypotheticals, let's talk about one of the most entertaining variations I have ever seen. That is the UK game show Golden Balls. At the end of the show, two contestants face off. They have to decide whether to split the jackpot or steal it. The rules are brutal and simple. If both choose to split, they each walk away with half. If one splits and the other steals, the thief takes it all. But if they both try to steal, both go home empty-handed. It's textbook prisoner's dilemma with one twist. They can talk, they can negotiate, beg, manipulate, guilt. whatever it takes. What the show ultimately tells us is that people don't always follow the neat mathematical logic of game theory. People are messy and they're prideful, they're emotional, sometimes even vindictive. And in the realm of interest group maintenance, this matters. Because interest groups face the same dilemma. Everyone wants the win, but not everyone wants to do the work. Everyone hopes others will show up and donate and protest and organize while they sit back and enjoy the benefits. That's the free rider problem. And without strong incentives, transparency, and trust, the whole thing can collapse. Golden balls may be funny, but it's also a great case study in what happens when cooperation becomes too fragile to sustain. For interest groups, the challenge is to build systems and relationships strong enough to beat this dilemma.
To split or steal. Lucy, Tony, you've been through a great deal to get here. You have trusted each other all the way through. However, you now have two final golden balls in front of you. They're the most important balls in the game. They're not cash balls, they're not killer balls. You both have a golden ball with the word split written inside. You both have a golden ball with the word steal written inside. You will both make a conscious choice of picking split or steal. Neither of you will know what the other has chosen. If you both choose the split ball, you will share today's jackpot of £66,885 and you will go home each with £33,442.50. That's an enormous amount of money. If one of you splits and one of you steals, whoever steals goes home with the total jackpot of £66,885. Whoever splits goes home with nothing. If you're both greedy and you both try to play clever and you both steal, you both go home with a big fat zero. And there's £66,885 in that jackpot. Are you both clear what it means?
Yep.
I'm going to ask you now to check the two golden balls to make sure which is the split ball and which is the steal ball. Tony, Lucy, check your balls to see which is split and which is steal. Before I ask you to choose, I'm going to give you a little bit of time to talk to each other about what's happened today and how you feel.
Go for it.
Tony, it's £33,000 each. That's amazing. That would change my life. We have to split.
I brought the 65,000 through all the way, and we've managed to keep it on there and share it between us. We've done well. There's a huge amount each to share and go away with. It's a dream amount. I'll definitely be splitting this with you.
Me too.
Both confident you know what you're going to do?
Absolutely.
Yep.
You sure?
Positive.
Yeah. Split.
Lucy, Tony, choose the split or steal ball now. Are you ready? Split or steal? Wow! £66,885. What have you done? You've got through this far and you're going home with nothing. That is unbelievable. I have to say, on behalf of ITV, thank you for your incredible generosity. That was your decision. That's the game. And so there's just time for me to say they've been, well, greedy. I've been Jasper Carrott. This has been Golden Balls. Until next time, goodbye.
When Tony revealed the steel ball, I was so upset. That's so much money to lose.
I just saw some gestures or sort of body language from Lucy that made me think she was going to steal.
I feel so upset about losing that money, and I'm going to be upset for a long time.
Peep this cartoon. You've got dozens of cars in traffic, stuck bumper to bumper, and each driver is thinking the exact same thing. If these idiots would just take the bus, I could be home by now. It's funny because it's true, and because it reveals something deeply frustrating about human behavior. This is the collective action problem in a nutshell. Everyone wants less traffic, everyone wants the system to work better, but no one wants to be the one to change their own behavior to make it happen. Each person assumes that the problem lies with someone else, with those other idiots. And of course, they're all thinking the same thing. They all stayed in their cars. It's a perfect example of what happens when individual rationality leads to collective irrationality. From a personal standpoint, it makes sense to drive. Comfort, control, convenience. But when everyone makes that same rational choice, the collective outcome is gridlock. Interest groups face this same logic. Everyone wants better policy outcomes. They want fairer wages and safer neighborhoods and cleaner environments. But the work of organizing, donating, showing up, making calls is often seen as someone else's job. And when too many people think that way, nothing moves. The group stalls. You should realize that this cartoon is sneakily also about democracy. Without cooperation, without some shared sacrifice, the whole system slows to a crawl. Or worse, it stops moving entirely. This next one, y'all, is a personal pet peeve and a perfect example of the collective action problem that plays out in everyday life. Abandoned grocery carts. I took these pictures myself. Carts left in the middle of parking spaces, on curbs, shoved into planters, and halfway rolled into traffic. Everyone knows where the cart return is. Everyone knows it's the right thing to do. But what happens is people think it's just one cart, or someone else will do it, or I'm in a rush. When one person does it, it's annoying. When everyone does it, it becomes chaos and it clutters the lot. It blocks spaces. It makes the store hire more staff just to chase carts all day. And in the worst case, it causes accidents or damage, all because folks couldn't be bothered to walk 20 feet. This is what happens when personal convenience overrides shared responsibility. The logic is the same as the traffic cartoon. Everyone benefits from a clean, organized system. But if too many people refuse to cooperate, if they all free ride on the assumption that someone else will step up, the shared system breaks down. But you know which grocery store figured this out? Aldi. Because everyone wants their quarterback. That tiny deposit, just 25 cents, creates a selective incentive. People return the cart not because they love order, but because they want their coin. It's simple behavioral economics with a big payoff. Fewer abandoned carts, cleaner lots, and a little bit of restored faith in humanity. Whether it's parking lots, public parks, or political movements, the lesson is the same. Democracy and civic life only work when people take responsibility for more than just themselves. Now, the free rider problem is exactly what it sounds like. It's when someone benefits from the work or sacrifice of others without contributing anything themselves. You see it in neighborhoods, on group projects, at jobs, and absolutely in interest groups. You join an environmental group fighting for clean air, but your friend doesn't. Did they still breathe the cleaner air when your group wins? Yeah, that's the free rider. They didn't pay dues. They didn't sign any petitions. They didn't attend rallies, but they enjoy the win. A nice, fresh breath of air. Multiply that across hundreds or thousands of people, and suddenly your group doesn't have the funding or the numbers or the influence to get something like that done. Obviously, this is unsustainable for a group. That's why selective incentives are important. To keep groups viable, you have to make it worth participating. The goal is to make the act of showing up feel rewarding, materially, socially, and emotionally. Incentives, incentives, incentives. Interest groups know they're fighting human nature, our tendency to prioritize short individual gain over long-term collective good. So they have to build structures that reward cooperation and discourage freeloading, selective benefits, material goods, solitary rewards, expressive satisfaction. These create reasons for people to stay involved. Think of it as political gravity. Without something pulling people in and holding them there, most folks float away. Incentives anchor participation. Material benefits are the tangible perks, the what's in it for me stuff you can see or use. A free mug, a bumper sticker, a discount on your next hotel stay, early access to content. Think Patreon tiers. Think of your local co-op giving you 10% off if you're a member. They're not just tokens, they're hooks. These are the social rewards, the connections you make, the feelings of being part of a community. Solidary benefits are about bonding with like-minded people, whether you're marching together or you're praying together or you're chatting in a WhatsApp group or attending monthly outings. For some people, that sense of belonging is more powerful than any cash reward. It's about identity and home. Finally, there's expressive benefits, the good feelings that come from doing something you believe in, from aligning your actions with your values. It's the I did something today that mattered effect. Expressive benefits often drive activism. It's why people canvass in the scorching heat, phone bank for hours, or rally in the rain. Because standing up for what you believe, it feels good, even when it's hard. I want to round out this section with a few, we'll call them bonus insights. First, small groups often have an organizational advantage. They're easier to manage and it's harder to hide. You can't free ride when the group chat only has 8 people. Second, groups made up of members who are only there for selective benefits, those tend to struggle. Those members are less likely to mobilize when it really matters. Third, interest groups don't calm passions. They intensify them. Being in a group makes people more committed, it makes them more activated, and sometimes more radical. And lastly, not all groups are created equal. Some, especially corporate and professional organizations, have more access and influence than grassroots or citizens groups. That's just how power has worked in this country, and it's something to keep in mind as we shift towards strategy. And not all interest groups are chasing the same goals. Some are about the bottom line, some about justice, and some are just trying to hold the government accountable. Economic interest groups are out to protect or expand their financial advantage. You need to think about the Chamber of Commerce or industry associations or big unions. They want policies that help their businesses, their industries, and their profits. Equal opportunity interest groups are focused on civil and economic rights for underrepresented communities like racial minorities and women, LGBTQ folks, people living with disabilities. Think about the NAACP or the Human Rights Campaign. Public interest groups try to advocate for the greater good, things like clean air, consumer protections, government ethics. These are groups like Common Cause or Public Citizen. Their mission is to speak up for the people, especially when there's no profit in it. Here are the big 6 things that interest groups do. Representation. They advocate for their members' interests with policymakers. Participation. They give people a way to act beyond just voting. Education. This is a big one. They educate both the public and lawmakers on issues. Agenda building. They get their issues noticed and prioritized. Program alternatives. They don't just complain, they propose solutions. And program monitoring. They track laws and regulations to make sure that the promises that were made are kept and that damage is avoided. Once an interest group is up and running, they influence policy with strategy. The playbook could include direct lobbying, indirect lobbying, paid and earned media, grassroots activism, AstroTurfing, litigation, and of course, money. We'll start with direct lobbying.
We are going to drain the swamp.
It is undermining American democracy.
Lobbying is arguably the American government's oldest profession. It's an industry worth over $3.5 billion with around 12,000 professionals and hundreds of firms, unions, trade associations, and interest groups in the field. It's one of the main drivers of policymaking in the U.S., but people still don't know much about it.
I think one of the misconceptions about lobbyists is that, we walk around with bags of money and say, vote our way or support this or oppose this. But it's not even close to the truth.
We want ultimately our policies to be based on the merits. And we want as much information as possible, as long as it is truthful and relevant and meaningful.
Almost everyone agrees with that premise, but consensus pretty much ends there.
Who gets the tax breaks, and who gets the subsidies, and who gets the bailouts, and who gets the regulatory rollbacks that increase profits? Well, obviously, it's the biggest corporations and the wealthiest people at the top. We've got to get big money out of politics.
There's no real oversight of the lobbying industry.
I understand the complaint. I think they're unjustified in 99.9% of the time.
The pandemic has spurred record spending on lobbying in the first quarter in 2020, but public perception of the profession remains low. So how does this elusive industry work, and is it as corrupt as it appears?
My name is Marcy McSwain, and I work as a lobbyist.
Marcy started her own firm in early 2019. Before that, she worked nearly a decade for former Congressman Ray McGrath.
Lobbyists need to be the most trustworthy people. You can't have a job in this town very long if you're trying to trick, if you don't equip the member of Congress with information that's going to be helpful to his or her district.
Lobbying is an age-old profession that dates back to when the Constitution was created. Experts claim the framers included the practice intentionally to make sure no one interest group became too powerful. The ability of individuals, groups, and corporations to lobby the government was therefore protected by the right to petition in the First Amendment.
But there's a sense that we're a large and diverse country with a lot of different people who have a lot of different interests. And there should be a way for people to speak directly to their elected officials and say, hey, you should support this policy, or hey, you should oppose this policy.
In 2019, 12,170 bills, resolutions, and amendments were taken up by Congress. Many more thousand were killed. With about 12,000 professionals at trade associations, in-house unions, or private firms, lobbyists play a major role in American policymaking.
I think there's a popular perception that lobbyists come in and do all this sweet talking, lay down piles of cash, lavish dinners, and get what they want. In reality, lobbying is much more boring. It's making the same argument over and over again. It's slowly building coalitions. It's talking to lots of different people and trying to build a case for your client or your perspective.
You go to a breakfast fundraiser in the morning, then you go to work, you do your job, then you go to lunch fundraiser, then you come back, then you have another committee hearing or a markup, or you go start calling on your offices, and then you go to a cocktail fundraiser, and then you go to a dinner fundraiser, then you rinse and repeat.
Jimmy Williams lives on a 50-acre farm in rural South Carolina. But before moving back here, he spent nearly 20 years in Washington, D.C.'s political scene.
Anyone that ever tells you that the idea of the money, the lure of the money is not there, then they're lying to you, because it's absolutely there.
Between 2000 and 2002, Jimmy was the economic policy advisor to Illinois Democratic State Senator Dick Durbin. He says with a degree in literature, he needed the information that lobbyists shared with him.
I did everything from trade to taxes to budgets. If it had money signs on it, I did it. And I learned a lot from those guys. Then I learned over time that lobbyists will only tell you what they want you to know. And then I would say, okay, great. Who's against you? And I'd start writing it down. So who's against you? No one's against you. This should never be a problem to get this passed because nobody's against you. And they would look at me and be like, well, we may have. I'm like, okay, so who's against you?
Say it's part teacher is an educator and in part lawyer is defending or protecting or trying to implement something. People will say, we don't want lobbyists writing bills. You'd rather have us writing them than you would a member of Congress who has zero experience in the issues that you're dealing with.
The problem is that there are only 24 hours in the day. And these representatives, these senators, they may not have time or make time to seek alternative perspectives. And especially when those alternative perspectives are coming from groups or individuals that do not have the ability to make campaign donations.
There is a reason why these people are putting huge amounts of money into our political system.
I think America responded to somebody who goes to Washington owing no one anything.
The more money you spend on members of Congress, the more times you get meetings. It's not about Democrats or Republicans. It's about the reality of money in politics.
In 2019, about $3.5 billion was spent on lobbying, nearly twice the combined budgets of the Senate and the House. But it's not only a large industry. Corporations are spending the most. Of the top 100 entities lobbying, 95% are corporations.
Businesses are a part of the American public. They're good for economies. I think it's okay to want a business to be successful. That's why you do it. Discussing those things is important to take to the Hill. It's important for elected officials to know how it will impact businesses, even if it is individually.
The shift to corporate lobbying is relatively new. Up until the 1970s, corporations largely stayed out of Washington. Labor unions were much more important and special interest groups bigger actors than they are today.
There was a growth of regulatory agencies that were created in the 1960s and the 1970s. And so corporations began to feel that politics actually did threaten their business a lot more. And there was just a sense that the public opinion was moving in a more socialist direction, and businesses needed to stand up for free enterprise.
With little oversight, the next few decades were a free-for-all for lobbying.
When I was a staffer, I had lobbyists from every industry taken. This is back before the rules had changed. Big, huge dinners, thousands of dollars, expensive wines. Seafood towers, you name it. It was all legal. And I would just laugh, giggle to myself, thinking, you think that my boss is going to be with you because you just bought me a $250 bottle of wine? You're full of...
The rule changes that Jimmy is referring to are laws that were passed in the aftermath of one of the biggest lobbying scandals in American history. In 2006, the Lobbying Transparency and Accountability Act was passed, and a year later, the Honest Leadership and Open Government Act. They tightened the disclosure, information, and reporting requirements from an earlier law and set ethical guidelines regarding gifts and bribes. One of the laws also made some restrictions on who and when former congressional employees could lobby once transitioning to the private sector. Still, opponents say it's not enough.
There's no real oversight of the lobbying industry. The disclosures are voluntary. The enforcement is basically non-existent. The number of lobbyists who have been punished, you can probably count on one hand.
If a senator tells you that they don't know how much money a lobbyist has given their campaign, they're lying to you.
The symbiotic relationship between campaign finance and lobbying is often contested. Following a 2014 Supreme Court decision, there is no longer a limit on how much an individual can give in total.
Biggest one, they're all making PAC donations and even direct individual donations. So sending an army of lobbyists up to work Capitol Hill to follow that donation is kind of, the 1-2 punch. You first give the donation and you next have your lobbyist pay a call.
Looking through public records, almost every major entity who spends on lobbying also donates to campaigns. Wall Street, for example, spent over a record $2 billion on the 2016 presidential election.
I, for one, if you said that everybody in this country could not make a political donation, I would jump up and down for joy for that. And I think 99.9% of my colleagues would as well. It's not us you have to turn to. It's the House, the Senate, and the White House, and anybody else who asks for a campaign donation.
After spending 5 years with trade associations, Jimmy moved to the for-profit firms. That's when things changed.
It was very rewarding financially because I got paid a lot more. But at the same time, I was then beginning to figure out that people didn't give a damn about my knowledge of banking or of the real estate industry. It was all about checks. No one gave a damn about anything other than who I knew and how much would it cost for us to write checks to get into those offices, i.e. campaign donation. And that was a big turnoff. And I wasn't happy with that.
Studies are divided about the impact of campaign donations on the corporation's bottom line. For example, a 2017 study found that the victory of a company's preferred candidate only increases the firm's value by 0.05%. But that study didn't consider lobbying. The Sunlight Foundation examined 14 million records from 2007 to 2012, including on campaign contributions and lobbying expenditure, and found that for every dollar spent, the corporation received $760 from the government.
The estimates are all over the place, but it's clear that lobbying works enough of the time. It's sort of like the old saw about the executive who says, well, half the money I spent on advertising is wasted. Problem is I just don't know which half.
Big tech, Facebook, Google, whatever, are underestimating the furious anger of Capitol Hill.
So it may also come as no surprise that those same companies are pouring a lot of money into lobbying those very lawmakers.
One group that recently started appreciating the power of lobbying is the tech industry. Dogged by their handling of consumer data, misinformation, and harmful content after the 2016 election, the tech giants entered Washington full force. In 2019, Amazon, Facebook, Google, and Apple spent over $50 million on lobbying.
In the 80s, Microsoft was kind of the big dog, and they were losing in antitrust issues and finally kind of decided if you can't beat them, join them instead of shop in Washington. And that has been true for tech too.
When it comes to advertising and investment and R&D and all those things, lobbying is just as important as everybody else. If you don't believe me, ask Google. They're about to get slapped by the Department of Justice, aren't they? Google is hired up. Smart move. Very smart move.
Much of lobbyists' successes are attributed to their deep understanding of the regulatory process and personal connections to Capitol Hill. That's something called the revolving door in politics. One study found that nearly 60% of retired or defeated lawmakers of the 115th Congress found jobs in lobbying.
You know, when I went to work for Durbin, I could go to work for any of those Democratic senators, but I chose him because I knew he was going places. That put me in a very good place as a lobbyist because I knew that people would pick me up because I would have influence in those offices. So if I'm a corporation, I'm hiring Jimmy Williams.
Are there rules in place to prohibit them from having the special treatment and things like that? Absolutely. Are they broken? Absolutely. It is an honor system type of rules and regulations that we adhere to.
2020 has been a busy year for lobbyists so far. According to the Center for Responsive Politics, lobbying spent for this year's first quarter is the highest on record. Some of the biggest spenders also saw considerable help from the relief package.
I don't care if you're a small business or a medium-sized business or a large business, if you're a trade association, a union, if you don't have a government affairs strategy, you are going to be left behind. I will continue to point to the pandemic is a perfect example that if you didn't have somebody here with the relationships and speaking for you, well, then you likely didn't get what you wanted or needed to help yourself.
Lobbying is often criticized for its ability to tilt policymaking in the favor of those with unlimited resources. At the end of the day, though, lobbying is a profession protected by the Constitution and unlikely going anywhere.
Without a chemical company, how do you think you're going to get a single fruit and vegetable in this country? And whether or not someone on the left or the right likes it, that is irrelevant to me. I can go to sleep knowing that I have fed millions of children in this country who legislation helped pass. Not all corporate is bad, but my work that I did I wouldn't change any of it for the world, not a single bit of it.
The most important thing is to get big money out of politics. One way is to provide public financing of elections and get a Supreme Court that really understands that money is really distorting speech. It's not speech. It's actually drowning the speech of most people.
Everyone always says, drain the swamp, and all these lobbyists who've been up there and for so long and they're the worst. And I tell sometimes my friends and family, I'm like, that's me. They're like, no, not you. You're great. We're glad you're out there. I'm like, but I am the swamp. We're not working against anyone. We're hoping to work for and improve the lives of people here in the state. Important role. And we generally try to do our jobs well and responsibly.
Lobbying is the bread and butter of the influence game. It means meeting with lawmakers, testifying before committees, or talking directly to bureaucrats who draft regulations. It's personal and it's targeted. It's often done by professionals who know exactly who to call and what buttons to press. This is where access matters most. Having the right contacts or enough campaign contributions opens doors that regular people can't walk through. Lobbying isn't always clean. I know. Shocking. In fact, in just the past quarter century, we've seen some folks get into serious trouble. Representative Randy Duke Cunningham took millions in bribes from defense contractors. Jack Abramoff, a major D.C. lobbyist, pled guilty to conspiracy and fraud and tax evasion. Senator Menendez from New Jersey is the latest scandal magnet. We're talking luxury gifts and cash, gold bars, and allegations of acting as a foreign agent. Scandals like these have pushed some reforms. Lobbying laws have evolved, but not always in a straight line. The Lobbying Disclosure Act of 1995 forced lobbyists to reveal who's paying them and what they're pushing. The Honest Leadership and Open Government Act of 2007 tightened rules on gifts and travel to members of Congress. The Foreign Agents Registration Act has gotten more attention recently, requiring disclosure if you're lobbying on behalf of foreign governments. And then there's the executive branch. Obama restricted lobbyists to government pipelines. Trump revoked some of that, but added a 5-year lobbying ban. And Biden brought back stricter ethics rules with transparency waivers. Indirect lobbying is when groups try to influence lawmakers by first influencing public opinion. If you can get voters riled, lawmakers feel the pressure. This is where media becomes a weapon and a tool. Indirect lobbying thrives on visibility and narrative and urgency. You're not just persuading people, you're trying to mobilize them. Interest groups use both paid media and earned media. Paid media are the ads. You can control the message, the tone, the timing, but of course is expensive and audiences tend to tune them out or distrust them. Media is the free stuff. News coverage, interviews, viral moments. You don't control it, but it often has more credibility. These are like protests and boycotts and social media campaigns. It's more authentic, but it's also riskier. Grassroots lobbying is real people doing real things, calling representatives, organizing rallies, flooding inboxes. It is bottom-up power. Movements like Black Lives Matter or March for Our Lives made waves through grassroots pressure.
It is an unexpected sight. All kinds of kids with all kinds of disabilities at summer camp, having the time of their lives. The year was 1971. The place, Camp Jened in New York's Catskill Mountains.
Wow, Camp Jened was a place that was a utopia.
Jim Lebrecht, born with spina bifida, was one of the campers.
It was a place where all of a sudden the rest of the outside world seemed to just disappear.
When you go back into...
Judy Heumann, who got polio at 18 months old, was a counselor.
You were really cute.
I really laughed when I saw the film. It was so funny to see me at 21.
And we are seeing this old footage now as part of a recent documentary called Crip Camp, short for the word crippled, which, let's face it, is not bandied about these days. Why did you call it that, Jim?
We wanted to basically let people know that this wasn't your average film about disability. That it was an edge.
Jim Lebrecht is not only a major character in Crip Camp, he's also one of the filmmakers, collaborating with Emmy Award-winning documentarian Nicole Noonan.
Jim made me see disability as a culture. He made me see disability as a community.
We could talk about Paris.
Jim vividly remembered this Camp Jened footage made by a freewheeling experimental group.
We're a People's Video Theater. Whatever actually you really want to say about yourselves, let us know.
They captured Camp Jened kids revealing some of their most personal feelings.
Yeah, about everybody want to be alone and in their life.
In later moments, Jim Lebrecht got to shoot video himself, a camera strapped to his wheelchair.
That's the simple one.
But Lebrecht had no idea what had become of the video after almost half a century.
And that was just incredibly enticing to me as a filmmaker. It felt like it would be the holy grail if I just spent night after night looking online.
She finally found it, and the footage became the starting point for the rest of the Netflix documentary, a project that attracted the Obamas as executive producers.
They really were creative partners.
Some of the campers, especially Judy Heumann, would become leaders in the disability rights movement.
You don't get to see footage of our great civil rights heroes at summer camp.
Heumann founded a group called Disabled in Action.
We decided that we were going to sit down in the street. We were going to stop traffic.
It was very important for all of us that we wanted people to see us.
You became one of several people from Camp Jened who moved out to Berkeley, California. Why'd you go out there?
I was offered a scholarship, and then a number of friends followed.
It almost felt like you were this little band of brothers and sisters.
Well, we were, really, and we still are.
In 1973, Congress passed a law giving the disabled limited protection.
If you get money from the federal government, you may not discriminate against someone based on disability.
But President Jimmy Carter's administration delayed approving new regulations needed before the law could actually take effect. Heumann helped lead a sit-in with scores of disabled people, including some from Camp Jened, at a federal office building in San Francisco.
Protesters in wheelchairs, the lame, the palsied, and the blind have occupied the entire fourth floor since Tuesday.
The sit-in would go on for weeks. Finally, Heumann and a small delegation traveled to Washington, D.C. to gain attention, hauled around town in the back of a truck.
In Washington today, more than 100 people marched in front of the White House.
On the 23rd day of the San Francisco sit-in, the regulations were very quietly signed in Washington.
The Congress, the press, the American public had seen that we have stamina, strength, intelligence.
But remember, those new regulations only applied to certain places. Jim Lebrecht, a few years younger than his other camp friends, was starting work at a Berkeley theater, a job that required him to drag himself up this flight of stairs every day. Did you ever just say to yourself, I can't do this anymore, I'm going to have to quit?
To be honest, no, I didn't. This job was a dream job for me. I felt like if I didn't succeed in this job, I didn't know what I was going to do.
But disabled Americans demanded change. They kept the pressure up, some even scaling the Capitol steps in peaceful protest. Finally, in 1990, Congress passed the landmark Americans with Disabilities Act, banning discrimination and requiring ramps and other assistance for disabled Americans nationwide.
Let the shameful wall of exclusion finally come tumbling down.
The Camp Jeanette gang celebrated at last year's Sundance Film Festival, when Crip Camp earned the Audience Award.
This was a love letter to the disabled community, and it is, and I'm so proud to be up here.
Now the film is on the short list for an Oscar nomination.
If we help people to reconsider how they see people with disabilities, or on a larger scale, anyone that's not quite like themselves, then we've achieved a great, great deal.
And Judy Heumann, who in 2010 went on to become the State Department's first advisor for international disability rights, believes that watching Crip Camp could bring a moment of truth for viewers.
Hopefully, some of those people will leave the film reflecting on how they have treated other disabled people, or how they may have a hidden disability that they've never been public about, and why that is.
AstroTurf lobbying, on the other hand, is fake grassroots. It's when a corporation or a political group manufactures the appearance of public support. They use front groups and scripted letters and bots even. Whatever it takes to make lawmakers think the public cares, even when they don't.
Sir, who are you shooting for? Texas Box. Have you got media credentials or anything?
Yeah, let's be on the city property for me, please.
What's that?
Be on the city property for me.
But you would say, in general, that you agree with their position that cap and trade is a bad idea.
Yeah, I mean, I'm reading this book, Liberal Fascism, all right? So I have a little more insight than the average person. So I came back at 11, and they said, oh, you have to have a shirt and a pass to get in. And I was so disappointed because their host looks at me and says, no. He points his finger in a very unmannerly way. I am irritated to heck that they should treat people who are on their side that way. But if they're going to have an event like this and they don't want to have arrangements so that the public could come, they shouldn't invite the public. It's not a grassroots event. It's they're all paid.
I got an email encouraging me to come.
And it was from Energy Citizens?
It was not from Energy Citizens, but I don't know. Actually, it was from an individual who said, please invite people to come.
They said then they won't let you have an American flag either. They said, we won't let you have this. And the guy touched it, and I thought, okay, you can't have a flag.
I got an email from Freedom Works saying,
from where?
Freedom Works.
From Freedom Works.
Yeah, saying, come, it's free food, doo-dah. And then I get here and they're saying, well, it's against fire code to let too many people in the door. So, and then they let all these people in. Granted, one of them was Drayton McLean, so
Yes, Drayton McLean got in.
he's got more money than God. So I guess.
Astro's patron.
Yeah.
These two guys came up and said, right away, you can't come in. I don't know how they knew that we didn't, but I guess we don't look like oil company executives or something.
They said that I had to be with the energy company or energy-related business. He asked me how it makes me feel about not being able to get in, and I said it makes me feel like they're doing dirty business in there. And I'm not afraid to say that on camera. I feel this tall right now, this tall. I'm for America and honesty. Big business and big government are definitely married, and I'm not picking sides. I don't belong to either one of them. Evidently, there's the peons, and then there's them. So those are the sides, and I'm a peon today.
That's the official story they gave me.
This is Citizen Sarah. I'm just have been summarily kicked out of the Citizens Energy Rally, despite the fact that I am a citizen and concerned about energy. I don't know. I got in just fine the first time, just kind of walked in with the crowd. I got to speak with a lot of people while I was inside, though, which was really interesting. A lot of people, though, didn't want to talk to me for some reason. Running out of video on my flip camera, so I got close to the door to try to see if I could hand off with Andy. And I was talking to, one of the sweet little girl security people. And as soon as I got close to the door, this really big security guard kind of grabbed my shoulder and said, "Wait, who are you? What energy company are you with?" And when I couldn't answer that question correctly, when I said I'm actually with Texas Vox, it's an online energy blog, then he got really upset, and he wouldn't even let me, register with the media table or give them my credentials. And I was just kicked out. Not with an energy company, not invited to be an energy citizen, unfortunately.
Litigation is a powerful tool in the interest group arsenal, especially for groups that don't have money, numbers, or direct access to lawmakers. Filing lawsuits, submitting amicus briefs, or challenging laws in court can force government action or halt bad policy in its tracks. It works because courts can create immediate binding change. Look at Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization. The decision to send abortion policy back to the states didn't come from Congress. It came from legal strategy. But there's a risk. A court win can spark backlash, and if you lose, it can set precedent and close the door on that issue for years. So litigation is bold, but it's not always safe. Since we've been talking about power, what makes some groups more powerful than others? It comes down to four main resources: money, size and intensity, information, and leadership. Let's unpack each of these. Money matters. Campaign contributions open doors. Advertising shapes opinion. Research ain't cheap. Lawyers, lobbyists, strategists, they all need to be paid. The Federal Election Campaign Act of 1974 started regulating how much PACs could donate. But then came Citizens United versus the FEC, and that changed everything. Suddenly, corporations and unions could spend unlimited amounts of money on elections, as long as they didn't coordinate directly with candidates. Political action committees, or PACs, raise and donate money to candidates. They can directly give to campaigns and parties, but they have strict limits on how much they can accept and contribute. PACs are like interest group wallets. They bundle donations and translate them into influence. If you want to get a lawmaker's attention, show up with a PAC check and a voting block. And don't get it twisted. A lot of interest groups don't always pick sides. Many hedge their bets and give to both parties because access matters more than ideology. You want to be in the room no matter who's in charge. In this case, bipartisanship is about access and power. Then there are super PACs. These can't donate directly to candidates, but they can spend unlimited amounts independently to support or oppose campaigns. That's why you see shadowy ads from groups with names like Americans for Prosperity or Citizens for Liberty. And don't forget 501c4 organizations, politically active nonprofits that don't have to disclose their donors. They fund super PACs, they run issue ads, and they operate in a fog of dark money.
Secret.
So, does all this money buy votes? Not exactly. Research suggests that money doesn't always change how lawmakers ultimately vote, but it does buy access. It buys meetings. It buys agenda setting. It helps shape what gets talked about and what gets quietly ignored. That's pay to play, and it tilts the system in favor of those who can afford to keep paying. Beyond money, interest groups also need size, intensity, and information. Size means more members to mobilize. A large membership gives a group some muscle. With millions of people, they can flood inboxes and phone banks and petitions with a day's notice. Intensity means passion. Groups with fired up members like gun rights advocates or reproductive rights defenders, they punch above their weight. Intensity matters because a small group of fired up activists can be more powerful than a bigger, quieter one. Intensity makes people show up. Loud. The final piece is brain power and leadership. Interest groups do the homework. They gather data, draft bills, prepare talking points. Lawmakers often rely on their intel, especially when they're understaffed or underinformed. Behind every effective group is a visionary, a strategist, or a tireless organizer, someone who sees the opportunity and mobilizes people toward it. Interest groups are reflections of what people care about, what they fear, and what they're willing to fight for. They amplify voices, magnify pressure, and challenge institutions. And they're as democratic or undemocratic as the forces shaping them. Are the most powerful interest groups in America today organized around the public good or around private advantage? What would it take to shift that balance? That's where your power and your responsibility comes into play.